Hey everyone, and welcome back to Rewilding the Future. Today we're going deep into the past to meet a predator that once roamed the wild plains and forests of South America. It was a hunter, a pack animal, a canine unlike any we know today, and yet strangely familiar. This is the story of Protocyon, the forgotten predator of South America, and the question of whether we could one day bring it back. The name Protocyon means first dog. It lived during the late Pleistocene, between 1.8 million and 10,000 years ago, alongside giant ground sloths, glyptodonts, and wild horses. Imagine an animal bigger than a bush dog, but smaller than a wolf, standing about 50 centimeters at the shoulder and weighing 15 to 25 kilograms. It had a lean but muscular body, built for endurance running. Its skull and teeth were designed for cutting flesh and cracking bone. Like wolves and African wild dogs, Protocyon was a hypercarnivore. Its diet was mostly meat, and it was capable of bringing down animals larger than itself. Fossils of Protocyon have been discovered in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, which tells us it lived across savannas, wetlands, and open forests. Unlike the modern bush dog, which prefers dense cover and rivers, Protocyon adapted to more open landscapes. Scientists believe it lived in packs, coordinating hunts, chasing prey across the plains, and cornering them into rivers or narrow valleys. Its prey likely included deer, peccaries, camelids, and even the young of much larger animals like giant sloths and horses. It was, in many ways, the South American equivalent of wolves in North America and Eurasia. But where did this predator come from? Around 3 million years ago, during the Great American Biotic Interchange, canids from North America crossed the land bridge into South America. Protocyon evolved from these early migrants, adapting into a niche that no other South American predator had filled. Yet, like many Pleistocene animals, it vanished around 10,000 years ago. Why? The answer is the same tragic story. Climate change at the end of the Ice Age, combined with human expansion and the extinction of large prey. Without herds of wild horses and giant camelids, Protocyon lost the foundation of its survival. Unlike jaguars or wolves, Protocyon never entered mythology. Its life was forgotten with the bones buried beneath the soil. But in science, it carries great significance. It shows us how adaptable canids are, how they can evolve into small, otter-like hunters like the bush dog, or into powerful pack predators like Protocyon. It also reveals how South America once hosted a complete predator guild: jaguars, saber-toothed cats, giant short-faced bears, and this pack-hunting dog. But here's where things get exciting. Today, companies like Colossal Biosciences are working on reviving the dire wolf, mammoths, and even the thylacine. Could Protocyon be next? Why is it possible? Because it is genetically close to the living bush dog. With modern genomic tools, scientists could compare ancient DNA from fossils to bush dog DNA, reconstruct missing sequences, and potentially create a living Protocyon. Bringing back Protocyon would require a combination of ancient DNA science, comparative genomics, and de-extinction techniques similar to those now being explored for the woolly mammoth, dire wolf, and thylacine. Fossil remains of Protocyon have been found in Brazil, Uruguay, and Argentina, and within these bones or teeth, scientists might recover fragments of preserved DNA. These fragments, though incomplete, could be compared against the genome of the bush dog, Speothos venaticus, its closest living relative. By aligning fossil sequences with modern bush dog DNA, researchers could identify missing genes and reconstruct a genome that approximates Protocyon. Using advanced gene editing technologies such as CRISPR, these ancient traits could be spliced into bush dog embryos, gradually recreating the morphology and behavior of Protocyon. Captive breeding programs would then raise the first generations in secure reserves, monitoring their health, hunting strategies, and adaptability. If successful, rewilding projects in places like the Pantanal, Pampas, or Amazon floodplains could follow, with careful ecological studies to understand interactions with native species, feral animals, and humans. This process would be slow, expensive, and ethically complex, but it is no longer pure science fiction. Modern biotechnology, conservation biology, and rewilding strategies are beginning to converge, making the return of Protocyon at least theoretically possible within the next century. Imagine packs of these forgotten predators once again chasing deer in the wetlands of Brazil, or restoring balance in grasslands where herbivores have no natural check. Of course, this raises questions. Would they adapt to today's fragmented habitats? Could they coexist with humans, jaguars, and pumas? Rewilding is not just about bringing back a species. It's about rebuilding ecosystems responsibly. If Protocyon were ever revived, the question would not only be where to release it, but also how to protect it. Like wolves in Europe and North America, it would face threats from habitat loss, conflict with livestock, and diseases spread by domestic dogs. To ensure its survival, we would need vast protected areas, wetlands, pampas, and forests linked by ecological corridors so that packs could roam freely. Protecting Protocyon would also mean protecting its prey, deer, peccaries, and capybaras, and the ecosystems that sustain them. In many ways, to save Protocyon would be to save the landscapes of South America themselves. One of the greatest challenges would be preventing conflict with farmers and ranchers. Packs of Protocyon might be tempted to prey on domestic animals such as sheep, goats, or young cattle if wild prey was scarce. To minimize this risk, conservationists would need to ensure that natural prey populations remain abundant within rewilding zones. Creating large reserves and buffer areas where wild prey is plentiful would reduce the chance of livestock predation. In areas where livestock and wildlife overlap, non-lethal methods could be employed. Guard dogs, reinforced night enclosures for animals, and compensation programs for any farmers who still experience losses. By working with local communities and showing them the ecological benefits of predators, coexistence could become a realistic and sustainable goal. Another major threat would be illegal hunting or persecution, as people might fear Protocyon just as wolves were once feared. Protecting them would require strong wildlife laws, strict enforcement, and continuous monitoring through modern tools like drones, camera traps, and satellite collars. Community education would also be essential, teaching people that Protocyon is not a danger to humans and that it plays a vital role in controlling invasive species and maintaining healthy ecosystems. Ecotourism could provide additional incentives, turning Protocyon into a symbol of local pride and conservation success. Ultimately, ensuring the long-term survival of Protocyon would mean treating it as part of a larger landscape strategy. This would include building wildlife corridors to connect fragmented populations, vaccination programs to prevent disease spread from domestic dogs, and even international cooperation to safeguard populations across borders. Just as wolves and lynxes have been successfully reintroduced and protected in Europe, the same principles could guide a future where Protocyon once again roams South America, not in conflict with people, but in balance with them. But what about South America's native animals and some newcomers from the north? If we revived Protocyon today, how would it interact with the wildlife that still survives, plus those arriving across new frontiers? The jaguar is the undisputed apex predator of South America, a solitary hunter capable of killing prey much larger than itself with its bone-crushing bite. If Protocyon were revived, jaguars would remain the top carnivore, but the presence of pack hunters could introduce a new dynamic. Packs of Protocyon might follow jaguars at a distance, waiting to scavenge from their kills in the same way that hyenas trail lions in Africa. In turn, jaguars might kill Protocyon if they felt threatened or if competition became too close, just as they do with pumas and bush dogs today. This relationship would not necessarily destabilize ecosystems. In fact, it could mimic predator guilds of the past, where multiple carnivores interacted, competed, and balanced one another. Jaguars would still dominate, but the existence of Protocyon packs would create a richer, more layered predator hierarchy. Pumas are highly adaptable, ranging from Canada to Patagonia, but they are solitary hunters. This lifestyle makes them vulnerable to competition from cooperative predators like Protocyon. In open habitats, a pack of Protocyon could outcompete a single puma for the same deer or capybara, forcing pumas to adapt their hunting behavior, perhaps becoming more nocturnal or shifting to prey types less favored by packs. Conflicts would be inevitable, with Protocyon packs occasionally driving pumas from kills, and pumas retaliating by ambushing lone Protocyon. This dynamic mirrors the competition seen between wolves and cougars in North America, where both species survive side by side but adjust their ranges, timing, and prey choices to minimize overlap. The maned wolf, tall and slender with its iconic long legs, is more of an omnivore than a strict carnivore. Its diet is heavily reliant on fruits like the wolf apple, as well as small animals and insects. This ecological niche is so different from Protocyon's hyper-carnivory that direct conflict would likely be minimal. Instead, the two species could coexist by dividing resources, the maned wolf thriving in grasslands with fruit-bearing shrubs, while Protocyon packs targeted medium-sized mammals. In fact, their coexistence could strengthen ecosystems by ensuring that multiple food sources, plants, rodents, ungulates, were regulated by different predators. The maned wolf would remain the fox on stilts of the pampas, while Protocyon would take on the role of wolf-like hunter. Bush dogs are the closest living relatives of Protocyon, and their behavior offers clues to how Protocyon once lived. Bush dogs are pack hunters that pursue peccaries, agoutis, and other smaller prey, often in dense forests. If Protocyon were reintroduced, the two species could divide habitats, with bush dogs dominating the forest understory and Protocyon roaming open grasslands, savannas, and wetlands. However, competition might arise where ranges overlapped, as both species rely on cooperative hunting and social cohesion. To avoid displacement, conservation strategies would need to ensure enough habitat and prey to support both. Their coexistence could recreate the canid diversity of the Ice Age, when multiple dog species thrived across South America. Coyotes are currently expanding southward, having already crossed through Central America into Panama. If they eventually establish populations in northern South America, they would be direct competitors with Protocyon. Coyotes are flexible generalists, able to thrive on fruits, carrion, rodents, and human-altered landscapes. In contrast, Protocyon would be more specialized as a cooperative predator of medium-sized animals. This sets up a potential wolf-coyote-style dynamic, with Protocyon dominating prime hunting grounds while coyotes survive on the edges, scavenging and targeting smaller prey. In regions where they overlap, conflict would likely be frequent, with coyotes outmaneuvering in numbers, but Protocyon holding the advantage in strength and pack coordination. South America hosts a surprising variety of deer species, including marsh deer, brocket deer, and pampas deer. In many areas, these populations grow unchecked due to the absence of pack predators. Overgrazing by deer alters vegetation structure, reduces plant diversity, and impacts wetlands. By reviving Protocyon, we could restore a natural regulator to these populations. Packs would focus on vulnerable individuals, the old, young, or weak, mirroring how wolves manage deer in North America and Europe. This predation pressure would improve ecosystem health, creating space for a wider variety of plants and animals. In this way, Protocyon could become a keystone species once again, balancing herbivore numbers and restoring ecological processes. The guanaco, a wild relative of the llama, is one of the most important herbivores of the Patagonian steppe and Andean highlands. Agile and fast, guanacos live in herds and graze on grasses and shrubs across open plains. If Protocyon returned, guanacos would likely be among its primary prey, much as wolves target elk or caribou in the northern hemisphere. A pack of Protocyon could chase guanacos across the steppe, isolating weaker or younger animals from the herd. This predation would not eliminate guanacos, but would regulate their numbers, preventing overgrazing and allowing vegetation to recover. In turn, healthier grasslands would support a wider diversity of species, from ground-nesting birds to small mammals. The guanaco-Protocyon relationship could restore the predator-prey balance that once shaped Patagonia during the Ice Age. Vicuñas, the smaller and more delicate relatives of guanacos, inhabit the high-altitude plateaus of the Andes. They live in tight social groups and are highly vigilant, with keen eyesight adapted to spotting predators across vast open landscapes. If Protocyon were revived, hunting vicuñas would be difficult, but possible for coordinated packs. Rather than relying on ambush like pumas, Protocyon would pursue them in open terrain, using teamwork to exhaust individuals. By preying on vicuñas, Protocyon could help regulate populations, ensuring that fragile alpine vegetation is not overgrazed. This balance would also protect water sources in high-altitude wetlands, which are critical for many Andean species. While pumas would remain the main predator of vicuñas, the presence of Protocyon could add a new layer of ecological interaction, forcing vicuñas to adapt their group defense and vigilance behaviors in novel ways. Capybaras, the world's largest rodents, live in immense herds near rivers and wetlands. With few predators capable of controlling their numbers, populations often explode, damaging vegetation and competing with livestock. A revived Protocyon would almost certainly target capybaras, hunting them in coordinated packs. This would not wipe them out. Capybaras breed prolifically, but it would keep their populations at sustainable levels. In the process, wetlands would recover from overgrazing, aquatic plants would thrive, and biodiversity would increase. Predation on capybaras would also provide scavengers like vultures and caimans with food, reinforcing food webs. Peccaries, the wild pig-like herbivores of South America, are tough, social, and armed with sharp tusks. They are formidable prey for a single predator, but a pack of Protocyon could bring them down. By preying on peccaries, Protocyon would help regulate populations that otherwise cause overgrazing and habitat disturbance when left unchecked. At the same time, peccaries' defensive behavior, forming tight herds, charging predators, would challenge Protocyon, ensuring only skilled and coordinated packs succeeded. This predator-prey interaction would add drama and balance to South American ecosystems, mirroring the relationship between wolves and wild boar in Eurasia. Tapirs are solitary browsers, often described as living fossils of the Ice Age. Adults, weighing up to 300 kilograms, would be too large for Protocyon to bring down. However, calves are vulnerable, and packs might occasionally target them. This would not devastate tapir populations, but it could keep them more cautious, altering their movement patterns and shaping how they use habitats. By preying on tapir calves, Protocyon could also influence forest regeneration, since tapirs are major seed dispersers. If their movements change due to predation pressure, it could subtly reshape where new trees grow, creating ripple effects across landscapes. Rheas are South America's flightless giants, standing over 1.5 meters tall and weighing up to 40 kilograms. They are fast runners, reaching speeds of 60 km/h, but their young are far more vulnerable. A pack of Protocyon could easily overwhelm a group of chicks or an isolated juvenile. Even adults, if injured or cornered, might fall prey to determined packs. This interaction would echo predator-prey relationships from the Pleistocene, when flightless birds faced a suite of carnivores. Predation on rheas could regulate their numbers, preventing overgrazing of grasslands while ensuring healthy, fast individuals survive. At the same time, rheas's alert behavior and keen eyesight could act as an early warning system for other herbivores when predators approach. Giant otters are apex predators of rivers, working cooperatively to hunt fish and defend territories. Direct conflict with Protocyon would be rare, since one dominates water and the other land. However, near riverbanks, encounters could occur. A pack of Protocyon might harass giant otters for fish, while otters could fiercely defend themselves with powerful jaws and coordinated attacks. The two species would likely avoid prolonged conflict, dividing territories, otters underwater, Protocyon on land, yet always aware of each other's presence. South America's wetlands are home to caimans and giant anacondas, apex predators in their own right. For Protocyon, these animals would be both a danger and an occasional food source. Packs might scavenge dead caimans or prey on smaller individuals, but they would risk losing pups or injured adults to surprise attacks. This balance of risk and opportunity would force Protocyon to be cautious near water, much like wolves in regions with crocodiles. Their interactions would highlight the complexity of predator-predator dynamics in wetlands. In the far future, some rewilding visions propose bringing elephants back to South America as ecological replacements for the gomphotheres and mastodons that roamed here until about 10,000 years ago. The most likely candidates would be Asian elephants, Elephas maximus, or African forest elephants, Loxodonta cyclotis, since their size and feeding habits more closely match extinct proboscideans. If such rewilding ever happened, Protocyon would not threaten adult elephants, but packs could potentially target calves or scavenge carcasses. Their presence would also pressure elephants to remain in groups, shaping behaviors just as wolves influence bison or moose. This would create a fascinating dynamic between an Ice Age-inspired predator and an Ice Age-inspired herbivore. In short, a revived Protocyon would not replace jaguars or pumas. Instead, it would become a mid-sized pack predator, restoring a missing layer of the food web. It could help control booming herbivores like native deer, capybaras, and peccaries, check ground-nesting bird populations like rheas, hold invasive feral species in check, and even compete with future arrivals like coyotes. South America's ecosystems are not only home to incredible native wildlife, they are now filled with feral animals introduced by humans. And many of these newcomers have no natural predators strong enough to control their numbers, except for the big cats. Jaguars and pumas still hunt in some regions, but their populations are small and fragmented, leaving vast landscapes without natural regulation. In these open areas, species like feral pigs, deer, and water buffalo multiply unchecked, reshaping ecosystems. The revival of Protocyon, a mid-sized pack predator, could restore balance where big cats are now rare or absent, filling the ecological gap they once shared together during the Pleistocene. Feral pigs are one of the most destructive invasive species in South America today. Originally introduced for farming and hunting, they have spread across Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia in massive numbers. Their rooting behavior tears up vegetation, destroys wetlands, and alters soil composition, while their omnivorous diet puts enormous pressure on native wildlife. They eat everything from amphibians and reptiles to ground-nesting birds and even small mammals. With few natural predators capable of managing them, their populations have exploded, creating ecological chaos. A revived Protocyon could play a vital role here. Packs of these mid-sized hunters would be able to target young and subadult pigs, putting pressure on populations that currently expand unchecked. By reducing pig numbers, Protocyon would not only control an invasive species, but also protect the habitats that countless native species depend upon. Species like red deer, Cervus elaphus, and axis deer, Axis axis, were introduced to South America for sport hunting and quickly adapted to their new environments. In Argentina and Uruguay, they now roam freely in grasslands and forests, competing directly with native deer and guanacos for food. Without natural predators like wolves, their populations can rise rapidly, leading to overgrazing and habitat degradation. If Protocyon were restored, it would be perfectly adapted to hunt these deer in open landscapes, much like wolves do in Eurasia. Packs could regulate populations by targeting weaker or younger animals, bringing balance back to ecosystems where vegetation suffers from excessive browsing. Their presence would also ripple outward. Healthier plant communities would benefit insects, birds, and small mammals, restabilizing entire ecosystems thrown off balance by invasive deer. Perhaps the most unusual of South America's feral ungulates is the blackbuck, Antilope cervicapra, a graceful antelope native to India. Blackbuck were introduced to Argentina and Suriname during colonial and post-colonial periods for ranching, exhibition, and sport hunting. Without predators, they established feral populations that thrive in grasslands and pampas. Blackbuck are fast and vigilant, capable of sprinting at high speeds to evade pursuit, but they evolved alongside wolves and Asiatic lions in their native range, predators similar in size or role to Protocyon. If Protocyon were revived, it would almost certainly target blackbuck, restoring the predator-prey relationship that blackbuck have lost in South America. The pursuit of these antelopes across open pampas would mirror the dynamics of wolves chasing antelope in Asia and Africa, returning ecological drama and balance to these altered landscapes. In the floodplains of the Pantanal, Amazon, and Orinoco, feral cattle and water buffalo are reshaping entire ecosystems. They compact soils, degrade wetlands, and overgraze plant communities that native species depend on. Adult cattle and buffalo are too large for Protocyon to hunt, and jaguars would remain their primary predators. But calves and weak individuals would be within reach of Protocyon packs. By preying on younger animals, Protocyon could help slow the growth of these feral herds. More importantly, their presence as a predator would alter the behavior of feral ungulates, keeping them more cautious, moving more often, and preventing overconcentration in sensitive habitats. This ecology of fear could reduce damage even without high kill rates, just as wolves influence how elk and bison move in North America. Descendants of animals brought by Europeans during colonization, feral horses and donkeys now roam wild across parts of South America. They graze heavily in grasslands, reshape vegetation, and compete with native herbivores like guanacos and deer. While jaguars occasionally prey on foals, there is no pack-hunting predator today capable of significantly regulating these populations. Protocyon could fill that role. Packs of these mid-sized canids would likely focus on young foals or weaker adults, applying steady predation pressure on herds. This would not wipe them out, but would reduce their numbers and alter their grazing patterns, making space for native herbivores to thrive. The presence of Protocyon would essentially restore an ecological check on feral equids that currently function as if they are free from natural control. Feral dogs and cats are perhaps the most insidious invasive predators in South America. They kill countless birds, reptiles, amphibians, and small mammals every year, devastating biodiversity. Cats in particular are highly efficient hunters, often killing for sport rather than food. Dogs, meanwhile, sometimes form packs that harass native wildlife and compete with species like bush dogs. A revived Protocyon would likely outcompete feral dogs for food and space, pushing them to the margins of wild areas. It might also directly attack feral dogs if they entered its territory, suppressing their numbers. While it would not directly control feral cats, the presence of Protocyon could reduce competition for prey and strengthen native species' ability to survive alongside cats. By restoring a native pack predator, ecosystems would have a better chance of resisting the destabilizing influence of these invasive carnivores. The hippos of Colombia, descendants of animals escaped from Pablo Escobar's private zoo, are one of the most controversial feral populations in the world. With no predators and plenty of rivers and vegetation, they are breeding rapidly, spreading through the Magdalena River basin. Adult hippos are far too large and aggressive for Protocyon to hunt. only jaguars or humans can threaten them, and even then only under rare circumstances. But calves are vulnerable, and Protocyon packs might occasionally target young hippos near riverbanks. Even limited predation pressure could influence hippo behavior, forcing them to remain closer to protective adults or avoid certain habitats. In addition, Protocyon would scavenge hippo carcasses, recycling nutrients back into ecosystems. This interaction would not solve the hippo problem on its own, but would add a new ecological pressure to a population that currently faces none. South America today is a patchwork of native species and feral intruders. Without large pack predators, many of these introduced animals thrive. But Protocyon, if it were revived, could be the missing link. A hunter able to pressure medium and large feral herbivores, restoring balance where none exists today. Could we really bring Protocyon back? With modern science, the answer is no longer pure fantasy. It may be possible. Fossil remains discovered in Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay still hold fragments of ancient DNA. By comparing these fragments to the genome of the living bush dog, its closest relative, scientists could attempt to rebuild the Protocyon genome, filling in the missing gaps. Using advanced tools like CRISPR gene editing, these reconstructed genes could be inserted into bush dog embryos, slowly bringing back the traits of this long-lost predator. This is the same line of research now being used to attempt the revival of mammoths, dire wolves, and the thylacine. In many ways, Protocyon may actually be an easier candidate for de-extinction, since it is so closely related to a living species. But even if we could bring it back, revival would only be half the challenge. Where would these animals live? How would we keep them safe? Could we restore them to ecosystems already under enormous stress from deforestation, hunting, and climate change? Rewilding Protocyon would require vast, protected landscapes, wetlands, pampas, and forests large enough to support roaming packs and the prey they depend on. Conservation corridors would be needed to link fragmented habitats, allowing populations to exchange genes and stay healthy. Without such spaces, any attempt to bring them back would fail before it began. And then there are the human conflicts. Farmers and ranchers would worry about livestock losses, just as they do with wolves in Europe and North America. Strict protections, non-lethal deterrence, and community support would be essential to prevent Protocyon from being persecuted. Beyond this, they would need protection from illegal hunting, diseases spread by feral dogs, and the constant pressures of human encroachment. Rewilding them into today's South America would mean facing challenges on every side: ecological, political, and cultural. The question then is not simply could we bring Protocyon back, but should we? Would their return restore balance to South America's ecosystems, keeping feral pigs, invasive deer, and exploding capybara populations in check? Or would we be placing a new predator into a world too fractured and human-dominated to accept it? These are the dilemmas that stand at the edge of de-extinction science. A vision of wolves of the South American plains running once more, tempered by the reality of modern landscapes already under strain. The story of Protocyon is a story of balance. It was once the wolf of South America, a pack hunter, a carnivore, a guardian of the land. Its extinction left a hole that no predator has filled. Today, South America struggles with feral animals running wild and native ecosystems losing balance. Could Protocyon be the answer? Could it once again chase deer, control pigs, and restore harmony alongside jaguars, pumas, and bush dogs? Or should it remain a ghost of the past, part of our history but not our future? What do you think? Should we bring back Protocyon and let it run again through South America's forests and grasslands? Subscribe to Rewilding the Future for more journeys into the lost predators of the Ice Age, the wildlife of today, and the rewilding dreams of tomorrow. And stay tuned. The next video will explore the bold idea of rewilding hippos into India, a vision of restoring megafauna to ancient river systems and reviving ecosystems that once flourished with giants. And remember, When we fight for the wild, we fight for our shared future.